I was conceived in a short bus.
The most bizarre car accident in motorsports history. So make sure to like, comment, subscribe to the original video and channel, and yeah.
The invention of the automobile predates the invention of...
I'm sorry. I see G-Wagons and I see Mercedes SUVs all the time at work, and I'm gonna say this to you guys. I find them disgusting, and I find them fruity and zesty. A lot of people drive them, or they're stuck up bimbos that drive them. That's personally what I see.
the airplane by just 17 years, which many may find surprising. After all, driving is far more simple than flying, so it stands to reason that we should have figured out one long before the other. But as it turns out,
Nope.
these two things have always been a lot closer than you'd expect. Officially, the first motor vehicle was patented by Carl Benz in 1886. It sold for the equivalent of $5,000 and at a top speed of 10 miles per hour.
Yep. Just how quaint it was. And remember, this was to be Mercedes-Benz. The company would eventually merge and form to be a Mercedes-Benz, but this just humble little beginnings.
This humble contraption would usher in the automotive world we know today. And as soon as we had
Well, not yet.
cars, it was only a matter of time before we started racing them.
I forgot they put this in Forza. Not Forza, I forgot they put this in Gran Turismo. You could actually drive the first ever motor car.
One of the pioneers of motorsport was a man by the name of Wilhelm Bauer, who would test drive vehicles for German automaker DMG.
Oh shit, really?
On March 30th, 1900, Bauer was slated to race the
DMG. You know where that's going to become? Yeah, AMG. Eventually.
company's new Phoenix model at the Turbie Hill Climb in France. However, in the first corner, he lost control and suffered a fatal accident.
Oh. Oh. Oh no.
By most accounts, Wilhelm Bauer had become the very first death in motorsports.
Yep.
It would be the last time the Phoenix ever raced. However, out of the ashes of the tragedy, DMG executive Emil Jelinek would improve upon his initial design. Over the next few months, he oversaw the development of a revolutionary new model. Unlike the horseless carriages that preceded it, this vehicle would be the first to truly resemble the cars of today.
Oh,
During
yeah.
the production process, Jelinek decided to title the model after his
You know
11-year-old
what's even-
daughter.
You know what's even more interesting too, is that there was is that up until I think like the 20th, like to the 1920s, the fastest sports cars, or like just basically the fastest cars in the world, were chain driven, like a motorcycle does, where the gearing is all chain driven from the crankshaft, as opposed or from the crank or the brake of the engine, as opposed to a crankshaft for the drivetrain. So you could see this at the Goodwood Festival of Speed. They have the chain gang races still, and there are actually like cars that were built into the 30s with the chains, and it's so wild to see, because to repair, like if a chain snaps, it's both a very easy but extremely laborsome like repair time to do that is basically just, you have to be as quick as possible to get back in the race when one of those chains goes, because like they do go. It's like having their own pit stop where you have to replace the chain, and it's just so wild to watch.
As fate would have it, this unsuspecting girl would forever be intertwined with the longest-running car brand in the world. Her name was Mercedes.
That's yeah, that's pretty. I mean, that's pretty interesting. I mean, also too is that the founder of Oldsmobile was called Ransom Olds. So the name Mercedes is not as bizarre in terms of automotive naming nomenclatures than how Oldsmobile's founder, what the actual name of Oldsmobile's founder was.
In the following years, the new model
The car
would
princess,
dazzle
yeah.
the automotive industry, becoming popular with many of the most powerful people
J.P. Morgan, Rothschild, John G. Rockefeller. The evil.
dazzle the automotive industry, becoming popular popular
Morgan,
with many of the most
Rothschilds. Yeah. Evil. Evil.
powerful people on the planet. Its
Yeah.
meteoric success would
Yeah, Ben's the king of cars. The Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, yeah. I mean, going back to names of like cars that with Lotus, the naming for Lotus was always, for almost every single model that Lotus has, is that their car starts with the name starts with the letter E, right? That's the genesis of all their model names. But in my personal opinion, one of the sweetest stories of naming was actually, first off, I believe the name Lotus, if I remember correctly, it was the nickname that the founder of Lotus, I know his name. I worship the man. I worship his philosophy for engineering, but he called the company's name Lotus after a pet name he had for his wife, who would later on run the company in his stead when he passed away. But the most successful model of Lotus when they were before Geely was the Elise, and the Elise was actually named after the chief designer's newborn daughter, and she would eventually be when she grew up and started driving, her first car was a Mark I Elise, named after her, that her father specifically bought to maintain and give to her upon her 16th birthday.
turned DMG into a commercial juggernaut. In 1926, they would merge with Carl Benz's company to solidify the present-day nomenclature of Mercedes-Benz.
Yep.
By this point, the temperament of Germany had changed considerably.
Weimar, win the Weimar.
The car brand, which had originally shared its name with a Jewish child, would soon become the favorite of one Adolf Hitler. By the Second World War, Mercedes had to momentarily divert their resources away from car production, as their focus shifted from the road to the skies. Daimler-Benz would be one of several companies commissioned by the Third Reich to construct.
Yep. I mean, Daimler and I guess Mercedes, I mean, here's the thing. With a lot of German manufacturers, like, people like to talk about Volkswagen being one that was conceptualized by the Nazis, but Daimler-Benz did a lot of, did the Heinkel bomber motors, the engines found in the Heinkel bombers and many other aircraft, but also BMW. BMW themselves were formerly a aircraft engine company before they started making cars. And they themselves would build the engines to power many of Germany's top piston fighters throughout history. And hell, even BMW and Daimler, as well as Junkers Hummel, would go on to as well as Junkers would go on to build the first mass-produced jet turbine motors for the first jet fighters, the Me-262 and Heinkel 162 fighter aircraft.
Construct engines for German fighter jets. Mercedes' horsepower would be instrumental in the Blitzkrieg, which terrorized Europe for more than half a decade. All of a sudden, what was once a simple luxury car brand had fallen into an insidious fate. To satisfy the enormous demands of wartime production, the company would resort to using forced labor, much of which came directly from concentration camps. When it was all said and done, the rest of the world had discovered a powerful omen. When Mercedes start flying, it's usually a sign that something has gone seriously wrong. Officially, the Germans surrendered in the May of 1945. However, in many aspects, the war never really ended.
Nope.
It had simply moved to a new battleground. By the 1950s, the Germans and English had taken the fight to the racetrack, and out of all the venues in motorsports, none was more prestigious than Le Mans.
Because to explain Le Mans is an interesting case, because it's like every other race in the world where, you want to fight for pole position, typically. That's a good portion of the races, but to win that, it has to be the most time led. To have the most amount of time led in the race, and it's an endurance race. So what really makes that mark is which car can last the longest and also maintain the lead the longest out of all the cars in the field. And then coming at the 24th hour, the final lap, that's the winner, right? But sometimes the winner's not. If I remember correctly, it's not always the winner who crosses the finish line at the end, but it's typically who's led the pole position the longest.
Since the birth of auto racing, France's premier endurance event has stood as the ultimate test of man and machine. For 24 hours, competitors must navigate the high-speed circuit, a process made especially challenging by the 3-mile-long Mulsanne Strait.
Yep, that's the killer, because you have to open it up all the way, and this is a actual public road. So this is not professionally paved as a racetrack would be. This is a public thoroughfare. And that's not a fun time of going at those speeds.
This section is one of the fastest parts of any course in the world. Ordinarily a public highway, the road surface is bumpy and abrasive, placing tremendous strain on engines as vehicles approach their top speed.
And chassis.
In order to win at Le Mans, race teams must strike a delicate balance between performance and longevity. This unique test of engineering skill would attract the industry's top manufacturers. By the 1950s, Mercedes had established itself as one of the teams to beat with their iconic Silver Arrow. They spent the early part of the decade trading wins with Jaguar and Ferrari, who had entered into an automotive arms race. By 1955, the rivalry would reach its breaking point.
Yeah, Ferrari, when we know how Ferrari's always being like the one to beat for during this era. I mean, it's not always being the case now, but like the legacy still stands. But I mean, the Brits and Italians are really going head to head with each other, but the Germans have always been that competitor that was just there, and when they do show up, they show up hard. Typically, it was with Audi. BMW would not enter for decades later. BMW is pretty much newer of the German automotive manufacturers, but it wouldn't really be till. But Audi was especially the dominant force for the Germans for the longest time.
Years of rapid innovation had contributed to higher top speeds than ever before, beyond what the existing infrastructure was designed to support.
Right.
An hour into the race, Jaguar driver Mike Hawthorne set the lap record for the circuit. Just moments later, he would instigate the biggest disaster in racing history. On the 35th lap, Hawthorne slowed abruptly to begin his pit cycle, forcing Austin Healey driver Lance Macklin to swerve around him. In the commotion, Mercedes driver Pierre Levay collided with Macklin, launching his vehicle airborne at over 120 miles per hour, directly into the crowd. And just like that, a Mercedes was flying again.
And you know what the worst part was, too? I'm not sure if he'll get into it. Mercedes used a lightweight body, construction for the body. Magnesium composite. And if you know about magnesium composite, is that once it catches fire, because magnesium is very, very reactive on its own, but it's in a stable form in a composite, but bringing combustion to that equation. Magnesium burns hot, and it burns and it doesn't stop burning until it's all gone. So there's one thing to have a car careen into the crowd, but when it catches fire, and it did catch fire during the roll, it becomes a rolling degree of disintegrating metal that is shot out like hot slag at spectators. So it was a horror show. Schlagans.
In 1955, there was no fence protecting the grandstands at Le Mans. Debris from Levay's disintegrating car.
The engine and transmission went flying out of the car too, so that is what's coming right through there. It's not just the body. You can see actual pieces of the drivetrain flying into the crowd.
Blasted the spectators at full force. In the blink of an eye, more than 80 people had perished. The world of motorsports had arrived. And
I said before, and one thing you need to know about Le Mans too is that it's not just, it's the race day. The problem with Le Mans is that there's also a massive carnival and fairgrounds like right beside the track too. And the area, the corner he crashed in was the main precipice where the fairgrounds and the spectator stands would coincide over. So where he was, there was quite a bit of women and children. That's what made it all the worse.
At its Armageddon, and Mercedes found itself at
See?
ground zero.
That photo there, that all that's left is the frame and tube chassis of the car. The body's completely burnt away.
Unbelievably, the race was not stopped. Crews gradually cleaned up the track as drivers continued to blow past at full speed. By now, LaVey's demolished car had burst into flames. The fire department was unable to extinguish the magnesium chassis, which just sat there, burning for hours. Lap after lap, Mercedes' remaining entry had to drive past the hellish remains of its
Oh, and by the way,
mirror image.
Yep, that's him. That's LaVey. Another thing to note about auto racing is that drivers during this era refused to wear their seatbelts because the rule was it's better to be ejected from your car and to die in an instant collision with solid earth or a wall than it was to die burning alive in your car. This is the same philosophy that First World War pilots had, where they didn't have parachutes, but it was better to jump out of your aircraft if it caught fire, because it'd be better to die from the fall than to burn alive.
It's hard to say when exactly Europe moved on from the Second World War, but it was clear at this point that Germany's greatest manufacturer still had some sort of cosmic debt to pay. As night fell, Mercedes had taken the lead, and the gruesome details of the tragedy began to emerge. After hours of witnessing the same unnerving display, the team had seen enough. When the clock...
Did he keep the belt? No, he didn't. He didn't keep the belt.
Clock struck midnight. The race director decided not to tempt fate any further. Mercedes withdrew from the race, just 12 hours from victory. The decision effectively handed the win to Jaguar, as Mike Hawthorne, the driver who started this whole chain of events, hoisted the trophy the next afternoon. The aftermath that followed would not be so joyous. The tragedy prompted an immediate ban on motorsport.
So, that's the thing. With LaVey's case, I don't know if he fully ejected from the car, because it's one of those muddled history things where you don't know if he got ejected from it, because I believe with most drivers they'd end up being thrown out of the car. I don't know if LaVey got that treatment. I couldn't tell you, and I'm not gonna look at the photos on stream because I'm not gonna show gore on stream. Even though it's archival and it's historical, I will not show that. But all you need to know is this is not the only time that magnesium caused such a thing, because there was, in Group B Rally, famously, 2 events would end up killing the Group B era of rally. And that was one when a car collided with spectators, killing, I believe, 18 or 8 somewhere between 8 to 18 spectators. But what really drove the final nail into the coffin was when, I believe it was a Finnish driver and co-pilot. I believe the car was a Renault, and they plowed into into a tree line at top speed, and the car ignited, and since the car was made of magnesium, it burnt so hot that it basically cremated the 2 occupants inside. And they were fully strapped in and harnessed. So it had, at the time, the state-of-the-art Hans had the new state-of-the-art Hans device, which was not implemented yet into stock car racing, but was very much in its early years during Group B Rally. So they were strapped in, and they got cremated alive by the magnesium car, and all that was left was really the tubing of the chassis.
It's across most of Europe, some of which remained in place until just 2 years ago. To this day,
holy shit, 67-year ban.
Some of which remain.
Whew.
in place until just 2 years ago. To this day, auto racing has never seen another disaster like it. Following months of government investigation, no one in particular could be found at fault. Hoping to appease whatever vengeful spirit they had angered, Mercedes would not return to Le Mans for the foreseeable future.
That would be a good call.
For Mike Hawthorne,
the Swiss ban, yes, only until recently they lifted some bans on auto racing in their nation.
Day would eventually catch up to him. Just 4 years later, he was fatally injured in a road accident, losing control of his Jaguar while attempting to pass a Mercedes. As the years went on, racing eventually returned. Le Mans received some much-needed safety improvements, and the cars that raced there went from looking like this to this. As our understanding of aerodynamics improved, the speeds crept higher and higher.
Of course it did.
All the while, Mercedes watched from the sidelines. They saw numerous racing dynasties come and go, from Ferrari to Ford to the most dominant of all, Porsche.
Oh yeah.
Maybe it was all that glory from a national rival that enticed them to get back into the fight. Maybe it was a new generation of leadership who had forgotten the superstition of the past. Either way, Mercedes decided the time had come to return to Le Mans. They just couldn't stay away. This time, however, they didn't go in alone. Before committing to a full factory team, they would have to completely rebuild their in-house racing program.
Which is hard to do because when you're out of motorsports for that long like Mercedes was, and I'm not sure if they were full, well, I say not sure. There were privateer teams that would drive Mercedes in other leagues, but in terms of Le Mans, oh yeah, no, they were going back into uncharted territory.
And they partnered with Swiss constructor Sauber, who would compete under the
Because you remember, Mercedes during the 80s was a monster in the touring car championship. So they had plenty of motorsports experience, and their engines were, I mean, supercars today still use Mercedes V12 engines, but they were or V10 engines too, and they were the monsters to beat in touring cars, especially for the time being. During the early 80s alongside BMW and Volvo, and pretty much those were the top three of the 80s, so you need to be able to beat them at all costs, especially the two German manufacturers. But as for like this type of high advanced motorsport, no way, no freaking way. They need to get their legs back.
80s banner. Their new model, the C8, was set to make its gallant debut at the 1985 running of Le Mans. Unfortunately, the new program got off to a rather inauspicious start.
Yep. There it is. Schlag
30 years later, and nothing had changed. The moment Mercedes returned to Le Mans, they were once again sent airborne. Although this time, the circumstances of the incident were quite different.
Thankfully.
The front end gets light and over 140 and wants to lift off and fly to Hawaii.
By the 1980s, race cars were beginning to reach unthinkable speeds, largely due to innovations in controlling downforce. As a car cuts through the air, the body can be sculpted in a way so that the resulting pressure sticks the car to the racing surface, increasing grip. However, at certain unstable orientations, downforce can be overpowered by...
So, just to be going off on a tangent here, but the reason why you'll see a lot of front-wheel drive cars, even with rear wings or rear spoilers, but people will go, well, it's not being powered with the rear wheels. Why do you need that wing for? Do you need that spoiler for? You're a ricer, bro. When it comes to front-wheel drive cars, you need to keep all four wheels to the ground because front-wheel drive cars especially have something called lift-off oversteer. And a problem with that is that once the front end goes loose, once you take your foot off the throttle, you have basically a very lightweight rear end that likes to come around and play. And if you have no downforce holding that rear end down, it wants to lift off before the front does, and it will want to come around on you. So in circuit racing, you'll see front-wheel drive cars have those spoilers or roof spoilers, especially on hatchbacks. Basically, it sticks the rear to the ground so it can, tightly grab onto the road and stick to the road and keep the car like on rails moving along the track. So when you do liftoff oversteer, you don't have a complete snap around, which is something I've seen before and I have experienced myself in front-wheel drive cars, because I know people typically think of understeer or hydroplaning in front-wheel drive cars, but typically understeer, where they completely lose traction and go into a curb or a wall. But I've experienced all sorts of phenomena in driving front-wheel drive cars on Toge in my lifetime, and it's once you go around, once that ass end wants to come around, especially on platforms with a very stiff rear chassis or very stiff rear suspension, it'll want to come around on you if you have liftoff oversteer without any form of aerodynamics or downforce. And once that happens, you're in for a ride.
Lift, sending the car upward.
It's
under
not
the most
really snap
extreme
oversteer,
speeds,
but like
such as the ones
you
at the
have
end of the
such
Mulsanne Strait.
violent oversteer that it will just completely throw you off, and it's hard to kick that right back on with front-wheel drive, because front-wheel drive, once you slam down the throttle, it will go where the wheels are pointed to, and when you're constantly sliding and moving, it's going to want to go in all sorts of directions.
Drivers were becoming increasingly susceptible to taking off. For Mercedes, this new incident of terror certainly didn't bode well for their racing return, but they were able to come out of it mostly unscathed. Driver John Nielsen walked away from the wreck in one piece, and since it occurred during a practice session, it was hardly documented. Despite the rude awakening, Mercedes would carry on. Starting in 1987, the team would debut the new and improved Sauber C9. Despite showing promising lap times, the model struggled to stay on track. 4 years into their Le Mans return, Mercedes had failed to finish a single race. But their fortunes would turn around after the return of a familiar foe.
Oh, there we are. Oh, look at that wheel cover on the rear. That was a short-lived fad, but man, look at that. That is such a wild-looking car.
In 1988, Jaguar was victorious at Le Mans for the first time in 30
The
years.
XJR9, yeah, there we are. That's what it was. The Jag, yeah. Yeah, Jeremy Clarkson is frothing at the mouth right now.
Perhaps this was the inspiration Mercedes needed to finally get their mojo back, because in 1989, the Silver Arrow re-emerged as the class of the field. On that day, Mercedes was unbeatable. In fact, the cars were so quick that they ushered in the end of an era. During qualifying, the Sauber C9 went just shy of 250 miles per hour on the Mulsanne Strait.
Whoa.
Fearing another catastrophe, the race directors determined that they had to get the speeds under control. And so, starting in 1990, a pair of chicanes were installed to interrupt the fastest part of the track. Following the layout change, Mercedes lost all of its competitive edge.
Oh, man.
Just as they had finally hit their stride, they were sent back to the drawing board. After several more years of lackluster performance, they withdrew from Le Mans once again to focus on other racing endeavors. This time, however, they wouldn't be gone for long. After finding success in the FIA GT Championship, Mercedes decided to give it one more shot.
The CLK GT9s are just absolute monsters, and the homologation cars that do exist of these things are just something else to behold. They're like an ugly duckling of supercars, but they are something else.
The millennium soon approaching, the manufacturer was closing in on their 100th year of racing, and what better way to celebrate than by capping off the century with a victory at Le Mans. By now, Mercedes were finally ready to field a genuine factory team, so that the glory would be all theirs. Their first race back in 1998, they looked as if they hadn't skipped a beat by qualifying on pole. The triumph was short-lived, however, as both entries would retire from the race due to mechanical issues.
Right.
But no matter, the cars had already proven they were fast enough. With a few tweaks, they should be able to stay on track and cruise to victory. In 1999, Mercedes returned to Le Mans with their pinnacle of engineering, the CLR, a machine that represented 100 years of innovation.
Yeah, this is the king of the king of the castle right here. This one is just like, I know I'm not one for Mercedes personally, but this one is something else. Yes, it's a bit of an ugly duckling, but these things were just, fuck, they were fast.
The car had an unmistakable look, its most iconic feature being the familiar Mercedes stylization on the front end. Throughout the company's history at Le Mans, no other entry had undergone more extensive preparation. After 20,000 miles of testing, no major problems could be found. By all accounts, everything was coming together for the last hurrah of the Silver Arrow. Entering the race weekend, Mercedes unveiled their holy trinity: 3 CLRs and 3 opportunities at making history. Over the next few days, the team would certainly rise to the occasion, just not in the way they had envisioned.
That A-leg.
The first sign of trouble appeared during qualifying, when the number 4 entry wound up totaled on the Indianapolis Straight. Driver Mark Webber was hospitalized, where he was treated for
343
minor
kilometers per hour.
injuries.
Jesus.
As reports of the accident emerged, it was revealed that Mercedes had once again gone airborne. Since the wreck occurred at an unpopulated part of the track, no footage was captured. For the time being, the reason for the mishap could not be determined. Was it just a freak accident, or possibly something more? Despite the ominous turn of events, Mercedes would not be discouraged. Later in the day, they announced that they would not only remain in the race, but that the number 4 CLR would be rebuilt in time for the main event on Saturday. Less than 48 hours after checking out of the hospital, Mark Webber was back behind the wheel. The team had worked around the clock
Not
to
a
get
boy. That's some serious endurance work. Like, to know what this thing's gonna do, and just say, you know what, I'm going back into it.
hospital. Mark
That jawline tells you everything. This man is just a different class of racer here. Gutsy, bold, and well, he's pretty much built for racing.
Webber was back behind the wheel. The team had worked around the clock to get the car ready just in time for the final practice session on Saturday morning. When the trio reunited on track, they must have been feeling pretty inspired, until it happened again.
We've got a car on its roof already. How on earth has this happened? This is amazing. This happened in the qualifying sessions. This car flipped over in qualifying,
again,
and it looks as though exactly the same thing has happened again. How on earth?
Holy.
If it wasn't already, Mercedes' little problem had now become known to the rest of the world, as television cameras caught a live view of Webber's car lying on its roof at the end of the Mulsanne Straight. The number 4 CLR had taken off for a second time. It was now clear that the first accident was no fluke. There was a fundamental flaw with the aerodynamics of the CLR. As it turns out, the defect could be traced back to the car's oh-so-stylish front end. The nose of the vehicle was designed abnormally long. This excessive overhang allowed more leverage for the air to generate lift. Under extreme turbulence...
Are Mercedes cursed by their own engineering and lack of foresight, and having the rare occasion where a German manufacturer does style over function, which is very uncommon for Germans to do in general. If you look at like most of their cars, they never do really style over function a lot of their designs. The last thing I can ever think of, like last production car I can think of that did that was a Carmen Ghia, because it was a monobody design, which you dent one part of the panel. It's like one whole panel of a car, but Mercedes here did what the Italians are very famous of doing, where they add a lot of flamboyance to the design over the actual function of the car, and they negated actual aerodynamic oversight and the length of the schnoz of the car, so that when that downforce was flying up against it, it was just such an overhang that all that wind pressure basically held on to it.
Such as entering the slipstream of another car, the balance of the CLR could be disrupted enough to send the whole thing flying. Now, just a few hours until the green flag, Mercedes was in a state of pandemonium. With Webber's car destroyed once again, only 2 entries could continue to the race. But would it even make sense to let them? The machines were clearly hazardous, but could they really let an entire year of effort go to waste? Perhaps the contagion was limited to the 4 car, and the other 2 had nothing to worry about, despite being manufactured to the same specifications. Ultimately, the decision came down to the drivers. While Christophe Bouchy expressed concerns about the number 5 car, he was overruled by the others. After all, it's a dream to race at Le Mans.
Dude simply rocked
But the
too
thing
hard.
about dreams is that no one is ever prepared when they turn into a nightmare.
Oh, this
After
scene.
some emergency
I know what's about to happen.
modifications to increase downforce, the remaining CLRs rolled off the grid. As the afternoon went
You
on,
might recognize the upcoming meme if you've seen that one flying car motorsports meme at all. The perfectly cut scream. This is gonna be it.
it was cautiously smooth sailing for the Mercedes. Boucher's concerns appeared to be assuaged as he made it to the first driver swap without incident. Replacing him in the 5 car was Peter Dumbreck, who would carry on into the evening. As dusk began to fall, Dumbreck had worked his way up to a battle for second with one of the Toyotas. When the pair entered the
we
Indianapolis
go.
Straight, they turned to face the setting sun. With the drivers momentarily blinded, the Mercedes drew ever so close to the back of the Toyota. The rest, as they say, is history.
Schlag dry.
Some people only watch racing for the accidents, and while they're often chastised by the rest of the motorsports community for missing the point, I sort of understand the appeal. While it's easy to write off this side of racing as mindless carnage, there is something spectacular about it that speaks to us on a deeper level. In sports, there are plenty of stories about glory, but the wisest lessons are often taught by catastrophic failure. In order to truly appreciate something for its greatness, you have to witness it at its most dysfunctional. In these rare moments, the accidents tell us more than the racing ever could.
Oh! It has gone again! Oh, there it is. It's into the trees.
Obviously the wrong decision.
And the Japanese survive. Yeah, this time they didn't get hit with the sun twice. Look, did you see that ship fly? Which, by the way, I've seen this footage many times over. I am somewhat of a motorsports aficionado, not too much. I shouldn't say aficionado, but I do know a little bit more than the average person about motorsports to an unhealthy degree. But this clip,
More
just
than the racing
watch
ever
it.
could.
Oh! It has gone again! Oh, there it is.
Look at
It's
it.
into the trees.
That is the end of Mercedes-Benz. Obviously the wrong decision to actually race.
Dumbreck was knocked unconscious from the landing. We crawl the wreckage unharmed. No shit. All future plans for the CLR were immediately scrapped. It would never race again. They fly now? Yeah, don't do that. No. Moments after the accident, Mercedes packed up and left the circuit. Yeah, they knew it was not safe. They have not returned to Le Mans since. Yeah. Jeez. Another one, man. You're the one here still. All right, that was a damn good video. Ah, man. There really is something about motorsports that's just amazing sometimes. Just
Even if you ain't a bitch, you still a